The Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom glittered with the who's who of the business world. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white orchids and golden centerpieces. The annual Excellence in Enterprise Awards was the most prestigious event in the corporate calendar, a night when rivals temporarily set aside their daggers and smiled for the cameras. Sebastian Morgan adjusted his custom-tailored Armani suit as he scanned the room. At 42, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had built an empire from scratch. Morgan Developments had transformed the city skyline with innovative, sustainable buildings that were as beautiful as they were functional. "Nervous, Sebastian?" his assistant Victoria asked, handing him a glass of scotch. "Hardly," Sebastian replied, taking a small sip, "though I'd rather be reviewing the downtown project plans than making small talk with people who smiled to my face while plotting against me." Victoria followed his gaze across the room to where Dominic Everett stood, surrounded by admirers. At 39, Dominic had the charisma and striking features that made him a favorite of business magazines. His company, Everett Enterprises, was Morgan Development's fiercest competitor. You could try actual conversation with him instead of this endless Cold War," Victoria suggested. Sebastian didn't answer. What Victoria didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Sebastian's animosity toward Dominic stemmed from something far more personal than business competition. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The ceremony is about to begin." Sebastian found himself at a table with other property developers, including Patricia Reyes, his mentor, and James Whitman, an old friend. 3 tables away sat Dominic, laughing at something the mayor's wife had said. "You're staring again," Patricia whispered. Observing the competition, Sebastian replied automatically. The awards ceremony proceeded predictably. Best Innovative Design, Breakthrough in Sustainable Architecture, Rising Star. Sebastian applauded politely, his mind elsewhere. The weight of the speech in his jacket pocket felt like a stone. And now, the award for Developer of the Year, announced Renata Gomez, the evening's host. This honor recognizes not just commercial success, but vision, community impact, and industry leadership. Sebastian's heart raced as Renata read the nominees. Sebastian Morgan, Morgan Developments. Polite applause. Dominic Everett, Enterprises. More enthusiastic clapping, which Sebastian noted with irritation. And the winner is Sebastian Morgan. The table erupted in congratulations. Sebastian rose, buttoning his jacket as he made his way to the stage. He shook Renata's hand and accepted the crystal trophy, heavier than he'd expected. At the podium, Sebastian looked out at the sea of faces. His prepared speech, filled with the usual platitudes about teamwork and innovation, suddenly seemed hollow. 15 years of hiding behind corporate rivalry, of channeling unresolved feelings into competition. For what? Dominic was watching him intently, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for this honor," Sebastian began, setting aside his note cards. "We're taught in business that success means defeating our competitors. That's been my philosophy for 15 years. He paused, his gaze finding Dominic's across the room. "But tonight, I need to acknowledge the truth that's driven me all this time. My greatest competitor has also been my greatest inspiration." The audience murmured in surprise. Dominic Everett. "And I have been portrayed as enemies, but the reality is much more complicated." Sebastian's voice softened. "Behind every building I've designed, every deal I've closed, was the desire to be worthy of his attention. Not his defeat, but his admiration." The room fell completely silent. "The truth is," Sebastian said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I've been in love with Dominic Everett since we were graduate students. Every rivalry headline, every business confrontation, it was all a poor substitute for what I really wanted to say." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Cameras flashed frantically. Dominic sat frozen, his face a storm of emotions. "So thank you." For this award, Sebastian concluded, but the real achievement would be finding the courage to build something that lasts beyond the next headline. "Good night." As Sebastian stepped away from the microphone, the silence erupted into chaos. He walked off the stage, past shocked faces and whispered comments, feeling lighter than he had in years. The truth was finally out. Asterix, the morning after the awards gala, Sebastian Morgan sat in his penthouse office, watching the city wake up beneath him. Floor 2 ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the skyline he had helped shape, including visible in the distance the gleaming spire of Everett Tower. Dominic's flagship project, Victoria burst through the door, tablet in hand, her usually composed demeanor replaced with barely contained panic. "Your phone has been ringing non-stop," she said, placing a stack of newspapers on his desk. "Every business publication has your confession splashed across the front page." Sebastian glanced at the headlines. Rivals to romance, Morgan's shocking declaration. Love in the boardroom, business titan reveals hidden feelings. Market shakeup. What Morgan's confession means for million-dollar merger. "I've had calls from the board members," Victoria continued. "They're concerned about stock prices, investor confidence, basically everything." "And has he called?" Sebastian asked quietly. Victoria's expression softened. "No, nothing from Dominic or Everett Enterprises." Sebastian nodded, unsurprised but disappointed. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. And cancel my lunch with the mayor. I doubt he wants to be seen with me right now." Across town, Dominic Everett paced the length of his minimalist apartment, phone pressed to his ear. "No comment means no comment, Julian," he said firmly to his publicist. "I don't care what they're offering for an exclusive. I'm not talking to the press." He ended the call and tossed the phone onto his sofa, running his hands through his dark hair. The previous night played on repeat in his mind. Sebastian at the podium, the words that had turned their carefully constructed rivalry upside down. The moment their eyes met across the crowded room, Dominic's doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. He opened the door to find his business partner, Julian Chen, looking harried. "We need to get ahead of this," Julian said, without preamble, striding into the apartment. "Morgan's little speech is tanking both your stocks. Investors are worried about what this means for the bidding on the Riverside development." "It doesn't change anything professionally," Dominic replied. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Really? Your biggest competitor just declared his love for you in front of the entire industry, and you think it's business as usual?" Dominic turned away, walking to the window. "What do you suggest? Issue a statement distancing yourself. Say you were as shocked as everyone else that this is Morgan's personal issue, that you remain committed to Everett Enterprises and fair competition." Dominic remained silent, watching a jogger on the path below his building. "Unless," Julian said slowly, studying Dominic's profile, "there's something you're not telling me?" Dominic turned, his expression guarded. "What do you mean?" "I've known you for 10 years, Dom. You and Morgan have this intensity that goes beyond normal competition. The way you track his projects, how you can quote his interviews verbatim." Julian crossed his arms. "Is there ever something between you two?" The memory surfaced unwillingly: a rainy evening in graduate school, an empty classroom, heated debate about sustainable design turning into something else entirely. Sebastian's lips on his, the weight of possibility, and then the scholarship competition that had driven them apart. "It was a long time ago," Dominic finally said. "It doesn't matter now." "Clearly it matters to him," Julian countered. "And based on your reaction, maybe to you too." Dominic's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced down to see a message from an unknown number. "Coffee. Just talk. No press." "Ah!" Sebastian Julian noticed the change in Dominic's expression. "What is it?" "Nothing," Dominic said, pocketing the phone. "Drop the statement if you think it's necessary, but I want final approval before anything goes out." After Julian left, Dominic stood at his drafting table, absently sketching the outline of a building. His mind kept returning to Sebastian's words, to the raw honesty that had cut through years of pretense. His assistant Rebecca called. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting, and Ms. Winters from the Wall Street Journal is on line 1. Also, there's a courier delivery for you." Dominic found the small package at his door minutes later. Inside was a worn, leather-bound sketchbook. He immediately recognized Sebastian's graduate portfolio. It's filled with brilliant designs and passionate manifestos about architecture's responsibility to community. A yellow sticky note marked one page. "This is where it started for me. Remember?" The page showed a collaborative design they'd created together during their final semester before. Competition and misunderstanding had turned them into rivals. In the margin, Sebastian had written, The Morgan Everett approach. Competitor collaborators. Dominic traced the faded words with his fingertip, feeling the foundation of his carefully constructed world shift beneath him. 15 years of channeling complicated feelings into business rivalry suddenly seemed hollow. He picked up his phone and began typing a response to Sebastian's message, hesitated, then deleted it. Some conversations couldn't happen by text. Some truths needed to be spoken face to face. The Riverside development plans lay forgotten on his desk as Dominic grabbed his coat. It was time to stop hiding behind boardroom battles and press statements. It was time for the truth asterisk rain pattered against the windows of Bluefinch Cafe, a small establishment tucked away from the bustling financial district. Sebastian arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy from curious onlookers. The cafe had been their spot during graduate school neutral territory, where two ambitious architecture students could debate design philosophy over bottomless cups of coffee. 15 years had passed since they'd last sat here together, Sebastian ordered black coffee and waited, turning his phone face down on the table. The media frenzy following his confession had been relentless. His publicist had reported that #MorganLoveConfession was trending nationwide. With memes and hot takes flooding social media platforms, none of that mattered now. The bell above the door chimed, and Dominic walked in, raindrops clinging to his charcoal overcoat. He spotted Sebastian immediately, his expression carefully neutral as he approached. "You kept the sketchbook all these years," Dominic said by way of greeting, sliding into the chair opposite Sebastian. "Some things you don't throw away," Sebastian replied. "Even when you pretend to have moved on." They fell into silence, as the server brought Dominic's Tyrrell Grey with a splash of milk. "Still his preference after all this time? You blindsided?" "Me, Sebastian," Dominic finally said, his voice low. 15 years of professional rivalry, and you choose a national industry event to declare your feelings?" Sebastian traced the rim of his coffee cup. "Would you have agreed to meet me otherwise? You could have tried asking. The last time I tried to talk to you about anything personal was at the Zimmerman Gallery opening in 2015, Sebastian reminded. You walked away mid-sentence to chat with potential investors." Dominic frowned, remembering that was business. It's always been business between us since Copenhagen. The word hung between them, Copenhagen, the architectural fellowship that had changed everything. "We were both nominated," Dominic said quietly. "Only one could win." Sebastian leaned forward. "I didn't care about winning. I cared that you withdrew your design and submitted a completely different concept. One that directly contradicted everything we'd talked about that night in your apartment." The memory crystallized between them. A tiny student apartment. Blueprints spread across the floor. Theoretical discussions about community-centered design evolving into confessions. Tentative touches, and finally, a kiss that had promised something neither of them had expected to find. "I thought you'd changed your submission to beat me," Dominic admitted. "Professor Werner told me you'd revised your plans completely." Sebastian stared at him. "Werner told me the same about you," said you. "Were playing me to get insight into my design approach." "And you believed that?" Dominic asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "You pulled away after that night? Stopped returning my calls? What was I supposed to think?" Dominic set down his cup with a sharp click. "I was confused, Sebastian. You were my rival and suddenly something more. Then Werner showed me your new designs that directly undercut the approach we discussed." Sebastian shook his head slowly as realization dawned. "Werner played us against each other. He saw our collaboration as a threat to the competitive program he'd built. So for 15 years, we've been fighting a battle based on a lie," Sebastian finished. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows as they sat in stunned silence, processing the years wasted on manufactured animosity. "After Copenhagen, it was easier to channel everything into competition," Dominic said finally. "To convince myself that what happened between us was meaningless." "Was it?" Sebastian asked, meeting Dominic's gaze directly. "Meaningless?" Dominic looked down at his hands. "You know it wasn't." Memories surfaced. Heated debates in lecture halls that were really just excuses to engage with each other. Development sites mysteriously bid on by both companies. Press interviews where they couldn't help mentioning each other. "We've built our identities around being rivals," Sebastian said. What would we be without that? I don't know, Dominic admitted. That's what scares me. Sebastian's phone buzzed insistently, his board members demanding updates on damage control. Dominic's phone lit up simultaneously with Julian's name flashing on the screen. Reality intrudes, Sebastian murmured. I should go, Dominic said. Standing Julian's drafted a statement distancing Everett Enterprises from your ... declaration. Sebastian felt a familiar wall rising between them, the professional barrier they'd hidden behind for years. Of course, business first. Dominic hesitated, then reached into his pocket and placed a folded paper on the table. I kept something too, he said quietly. After Dominic left, Sebastian unfolded the paper to find a coffee-stained napkin from this very cafe dated 15 years ago. On it was a rough sketch of their collaborative design, with a note in Dominic's handwriting, Morgan plus Everett, changing skylines, changing lives. Sebastian traced the faded ink, remembering the excited students they'd once been. For ambition and misunderstanding had twisted their connection into something unrecognizable. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, revealing what had been there all along beneath the grime of years and rivalry. Sebastian carefully refolded the napkin, a fragile bridge to a past that suddenly didn't seem so distant. The truth was more complicated than either of them had allowed themselves to believe. The question now was whether they had the courage to build something new on the foundation of that truth. The Riverside Development Project was the most significant urban renewal opportunity in decades. 60 acres of former industrial land along the waterfront, waiting to be transformed into a mixed-use community that would define the city's future. Both Morgan Developments and Everett Enterprises had submitted proposals. Their final presentations scheduled for the following week. Sebastian sat in his office, staring at the scale model his team had created. The design incorporated everything. He believed in sustainable materials, community spaces, affordable housing alongside luxury units. It was his vision made tangible, a vision that now felt incomplete. The board is concerned about your focus, said Olivia Morgan, Sebastian's younger sister and chief financial officer. She perched on the edge of his desk, worry evident in her expression. The Riverside presentation is next week, and you've been distracted since the gala. I'm not distracted, Sebastian replied, though they both knew it was a lie. Olivia sighed. Seb, I've supported you through everything coming out to Dad, starting this company, even your ridiculous feud with Dominic. But this public declaration has shareholders panicking. Our stock dropped 12%. Since when do you care more about stock prices than my happiness? Since you tied your happiness to our biggest competitor, Olivia countered, who, by the way, released a statement yesterday emphasizing his commitment to professional competition and respectful business boundaries. Sebastian felt the words like a physical blow. His statement, or his company's? Does it matter? Sebastian, you've built something extraordinary here. Don't risk it all on a 15-year-old crush. It's not a crush, Liv. It never was. Olivia's expression softened. She reached out to squeeze his hand. Then fight for your company first. Win the Riverside project. Prove you're still the Sebastian Morgan everyone respects. Once that's secure, figure out your personal life. After Olivia left, Sebastian turned to the windows, watching darkness fall over the city. Lights blinked on across the skyline, including the distinctive blue illumination of Everett Tower. His phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Can we meet? My place, 8 p.m. Across town, Dominic paced his apartment, stopping occasionally to adjust the placement of glasses or straighten the architectural journals on his coffee table. You're nervous, observed Rebecca, his assistant, who had stopped by with the final Riverside presentation materials. I haven't seen you this anxious since your first major project pitch. This isn't anxiety, it's Dominic trailed off, unsure how to define the restless energy coursing through him. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. You know, before all this, I always thought there was something strange about your obsession with Sebastian Morgan, the way you'd cut out every article about him, how you'd rearrange your schedule to accidentally attend the same industry events. It wasn't an obsession, Dominic protested. It was professional awareness. Rebecca smirked. And I suppose requesting the conference room with a view of Morgan developments was also just professional awareness? Dominic felt heat rise. To his face, "You're fired," he said without heat. "No, I'm not," Rebecca replied cheerfully. "You'd fall apart without me. Besides, who else would have kept Julian from sending out that awful statement he wrote?" Dominic froze. "What do you mean? The statement went out yesterday?" "Statement went out," Rebecca corrected. "A much more ambiguous one that I edited. It acknowledged your shock at Sebastian's declaration, but expressed respect for his honesty and requested privacy as you both navigate your professional obligations." "Julian will kill you," Dominic said, impressed despite himself. "Probably," Rebecca agreed. "But I've watched you build your life around competing with Sebastian Morgan. Maybe it's time to build something together instead." The doorbell rang, sending Dominic's heart racing. Rebecca gathered her things with a knowing smile. "That's my cue. Good luck, boss." As she opened the door to leave, Sebastian stood on the threshold, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. Rebecca gave him a cheerful nod as she slipped past. "Nice assistant," Sebastian commented as he entered. "Unlike my sister, who thinks I'm destroying the company, Julian feels the same way," Dominic replied. Apparently, emotions have no place in real estate development. An awkward silence fell between them. Sebastian wandered to the window wall, taking in the view of the city below, the same city they had both spent careers trying to reshape in their own image. "Your Riverside proposal," Sebastian said finally. "Does it still include the Community Arts Center?" Dominic looked surprised. "How did you know about that?" "The same way you probably know about my rooftop urban farm concept. We've been tracking each other's work for 15 years. Dominic moved to stand beside him at the window. "Yes, it includes the Arts Center. Expanded, actually, with studio. Spaces for local artists." "That was your idea back in grad school," Sebastian said softly. "Art is the heartbeat of community design. And you wanted green spaces integrated throughout, not just designated parks," Dominic added. We both held on to those ideals. Their shoulders nearly touched as they stood side by side, looking out at the city they had both helped build, sometimes in cooperation, more often in competition. "What if we combined our proposals?" Sebastian asked suddenly. "Morgan Everett. Riverside Development. Competitor collaborators like we wrote all those years ago." Dominic turned to face him. The board would never approve. Julian would have an aneurysm. Probably, Sebastian agreed. "But what do you want, Dominic?" "Not Everett Enterprises you." "What do you want?" Dominic's gaze dropped to Sebastian's lips, then back to his eyes. "I think I've spent 15 years trying not to answer that question." Sebastian moved closer, eliminating the space between them, and now I'm tired of running from the truth," Dominic whispered, closing the final distance between them. Outside the window, the city continued its rhythmic pulse of light and movement, unaware that its two most influential architects were finally blueprinting something entirely new, a future designed for two. The Riverside Project Committee room buzzed with anticipation. Board members, city officials, and press representatives filled the tiered seating, whispering about the unusual last-minute schedule change, instead of separate presentations from Morgan Developments and Everett Enterprises. The program now listed a single slot, Riverside Vision, a joint presentation. Patricia Reyes, head of the selection committee, checked her watch with a frown. "This is unprecedented," she murmured to the mayor. "We've never had competing firms merge proposals mid-selection. After Morgan's declaration at the awards ceremony, nothing would surprise me," the mayor replied. At precisely 9 o'clock, the door opened. Sebastian and Dominic entered together, matching in navy suits, but with ties that represented their respective company colors. Sebastian in deep red, Dominic in silver blue. The room fell silent, all eyes tracking their confident stride to the presentation area. "Good morning," Sebastian began, his voice steady. "Thank you for accommodating our revised presentation format. Before we show you our vision for Riverside," Dominic continued, "we want to address the questions many of you have following recent events." Sebastian nodded, 15 years ago, Dominic and I were architecture students with a shared philosophy about how buildings could transform communities. Circumstances and misunderstandings drove us to competition instead of collaboration.
We've
Spent our careers trying to outdo each other, Dominic added, creating separate visions when we could have been creating something greater together. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Julian Chen sat rigid in his seat, while Olivia Morgan watched with cautious optimism. Today isn't just about Riverside, Sebastian said. It's about recognizing that the best designs emerge when different perspectives unite around a common purpose. Dominic pressed a button, and the presentation screen illuminated with a stunning visualization clearly incorporating elements from both their original designs, but transformed into something entirely new. The rendering showed sweeping green spaces interwoven with innovative structures, community arts facilities, alongside sustainable housing, and a riverfront promenade that connected disparate neighborhoods. The Morgan Everett Riverside Community, Dominic announced, where sustainability meets accessibility. Innovation embraces tradition, and private enterprise serves public good. For the next 30 minutes, they presented seamlessly, each building on the other's points, finishing thoughts as if they'd been working together for years instead of days. The chemistry between them was undeniable, their passion for the project infectious. As they concluded, Patricia leaned forward. "This is impressive work, gentlemen, but I have to ask, is this a one-time collaboration or something more permanent?" Sebastian and Dominic exchanged glances. "We're exploring a formal partnership." "Structure," Sebastian answered. "Not a merger, but a joint venture focused on projects where our combined vision creates more value than competition." "And your boards approve this arrangement?" the mayor asked skeptically. "They're adjusting to the idea," Dominic replied diplomatically, ignoring Julian's scowl. After fielding technical questions about the proposal, they concluded to enthusiastic applause. As committee members gathered their materials, Olivia approached the presentation table. "That was unexpected," she said, studying the model, "but I can't deny its brilliant work." "It is," Julian agreed, reluctantly joining them, "which doesn't change the fact that you've thrown our entire business model into chaos." "Not chaos," Dominic corrected. "Evolution," Patricia interrupted, extending her hand. "The committee needs time to deliberate. But speaking personally, this is exactly the fresh thinking Riverside deserves." After she walked away, Julian pulled Dominic aside. "The board meeting tomorrow will be brutal. I'll want assurances this emotional detour won't destabilize the company." "It's not a detour, Julian," Dominic said firmly. "It's a course correction." Across the room, Sebastian faced similar concerns from Olivia. "You're sure about this?" she asked quietly. "Professionally and personally?" Sebastian watched Dominic across the room, feeling certainty settle in his chest. For the first time in 15 years, yes. As the room emptied, Sebastian and Dominic remained standing before their joint model in comfortable silence. "Dinner at my place tonight?" "Ah?" Sebastian finally asked. "To celebrate our professional collaboration, of course." Dominic smiled. "Of course, purely professional." That evening, Sebastian's penthouse kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and wine as he put the finishing touches on dinner. Dominic stood at the balcony door, gazing at the city lights. "We'll need to establish clear boundaries," Dominic said, accepting the glass of wine Sebastian offered. "Which projects we pursue jointly, which independently." "Always the pragmatist," Sebastian teased. "Can't we enjoy the moment before planning the next 15 years? Dominic laughed, the sound freer than Sebastian had heard in years. "Old habits. I've spent so long thinking 10 steps ahead, especially with you." "And where did all that strategy get us?" Sebastian asked, moving closer. "Here, eventually." Dominic replied softly. The dinner went untouched for nearly an hour as they freely talked about the years spent orbiting each other. The projects they'd admired from afar, the times they'd nearly reached out, but pride had held them back. "I kept a file of all your interviews," Dominic admitted. "Told myself it was competitive research." Sebastian grinned. "I had alerts set up for every mention of your name online." "We were ridiculous," Dominic said, shaking his head. "Sebastian. Raised an eyebrow as midnight approached, they stood together on the balcony. Shoulders touching as they surveyed the skyline, they had both helped create a physical manifestation of their separate journeys, soon to include shared chapters. "What if the committee doesn't select our design?" Dominic asked. "Then we find another project," Sebastian replied simply. "The riverside development isn't the only thing we're building here." Dominic turned to face him fully. "You realize this? Won't be easy. The press will have a field day. Competitors will see weakness. Our boards will resist. When has anything worthwhile ever been easy?" Sebastian reached for Dominic's hand, intertwining their fingers. "We've spent 15 years constructing walls between us. I'd rather spend the next 15 building bridges." Dominic's other hand rose to Sebastian's face, thumb tracing his jawline. "In that case, Architect Morgan, I believe we should seal this partnership agreement properly." Their lips met in a kiss that felt both like coming home and embarking on an entirely new journey, familiar yet thrillingly uncharted below them. The city continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to the immense, shifting relationship of two of its most influential shapers. But in the years to come, that city would bear the marks of their reconciliation in steel and glass. In parks and plazas, in spaces designed by two minds that had finally remembered how perfectly they complemented each other. Some rivalries were meant to be overcome. Some foundations were strong enough to build upon even after years of neglect. And some declarations, even those that stunned a crowd, were simply the first structural element of something magnificent waiting to be built.